Questions?
I have a basic question. It's just a term I haven't come across. Salami slicing?
Salami slicing, yeah. I don't, do you want to answer it?
No, you can go ahead.
Salami slicing is when you have a set of data and you try to crank out a number of articles from the same data. So you're artificially manufacturing multiple articles from maybe a database that could have had one substantive article out of it.
Yes?
Right now, today I find the main topic is about peer review. So I guess maybe the code should be give us some guidelines on the code. I'm very appreciate code. You know, in the 2011, I got the foundation from code about plagiarism. So this year, no, supported by code, I published the guideline book by Shrink.
Oh,
The
yeah.
title is also in the code. The book for different discipline and subject. The title is Against Plagiarism, Guidance for the authors and the editors. I think maybe useful for special development countries. So it's already in the code. It's also already in the stream. So I think maybe next we should get some guidelines from code about peer review. I'm very interested in both topic about peer review. But right now we can't find standards guidelines.
Right.
Thank you.
So for those who couldn't hear, just to sum up, the question was there's a lot of ethical issues around peer review, and could COPE offer guidelines around peer review?
And I think we do, actually. There are some, maybe we should develop more detailed information, but I think if you look at the COPE website, you'll find that there's guidance for, there's codes of conduct, there's guidance for peer reviewers, there's guidance for editors. So.
Okay, you mentioned your attitude about authors posting reviews that they've received. What about the other way around, with reviewers posting the reviews that they've written, but does that compromise the author's confidentiality?
Sure, I think this is all just this is a new area that people are now thinking. So some people are just, it's part of the continued discussion that's much older about should peer reviews all be anonymous. And now there's the question of who owns the peer review. You sent it to me as an author, so isn't it mine? Can't I do what I want with it? And the other side of the coin would be one expects peer reviewers to do so. They shouldn't be in a conflict of interest. They shouldn't want to use the ideas of the stuff they review. They should do it confidentially and not say, here's my review of that joker who wrote that piece of crap. Here's what I said about it. So it's a new contested area, and I think it's complex from one end to the other. There are people, I've had reviewers who refuse to give anonymous reviews. There are other people who think if you name yourself, you're less inclined to be constructively critical, that you may just soften your critique.
That's not even, I mean, identifying themselves to the author is fine, but then there's also these sites like Publons where people post,
Yeah,
saying,
that's right.
I reviewed this paper.
Yeah, I know.
Here's my review.
Yeah.
And it's kind of,
Yeah.
is that okay?
Personally
Yeah, I know.
and professionally, I don't think it's okay. I think the whole question of whether whether reviews should be anonymous or signed is an interesting debate, and there are pros and cons on both sides of that discussion. I think it's disrespectful, but maybe I'm just old-fashioned. I think it's disrespectful for people to be publishing their reviews. They should get some service credit at their university if they're a reviewer, and they do significant reviews. But I don't really think that it's professional or appropriate to be plastering. But it's these are ethical issues. Some people may disagree.
So I know we're up against lunch. I think we have time for one more question. I think there was one more.
This is more of a comment than a question, but touching on something Jason mentioned in some of his slides, I work for a society, American Society for Anesthesiologists, that's pretty large, 55,000 members. It has a complex governance structure with a lot of initiatives, and a lot of the leadership would love nothing more than to publish some content in our journal, which is a peer-reviewed publication. But there's been a lot of pushback from the editors on that because it's a peer-reviewed journal, and they say, well, they'll never make it through peer reviews, so they don't even bother submitting it. And it's frustrated leadership, and it's created some conflicts between the editorial board and the leadership of the society. And it touches on this idea of editorial independence. But right now we're going through an editor-in-chief transition, so everything's a little bit unstable, and there's a lot of onboarding with the new editor-in-chief. So we're just kind of concerned about that issue, editorial independence in light of a transition and some instability during this time.
Well, I mean, this is actually, I don't know how many of you are familiar, but this year we're here in Canada right now, yet again the CMAJ terminated the contract of an editor. In fact, I saw him on the Friday, and he was gone on the Monday. And this brought back memories of what happened about 10 years ago now, is it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the same process happened then. And, you know, there's a big stink up here in Canada right now about editorial independence and when does business trump editorial independence. There's also the issues of, well, you know, an editor, maybe this particular editor was judged on did they get the impact factor high enough for that journal. These are all things that potentially compromise what an editor can and can't do. And then, you know, if the editor-in-chief is the person that takes the blame for all of this or the credit, but they're often the ones that are only doing a small amount of the work. It's the editorial board. What message is conveyed to them? Then the editorial board, if they pick the reviewers, what message is conveyed to them? It just keeps going down and down. And this is, I don't know, there's no answers to these things. There's lots of conversation, though.
Unfortunately, we're out of time. I had about 5 questions myself, but Deborah and Jason are here, so I'm sure they'll be happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you for coming.